When looking at the history of Westeros since Aegon's conquest over its near 300 years, it's easy to view the death of the dragons of House Targaryen as happening very quickly. The way the Dance of the Dragons looks in a wider context of the timeline makes you view the war as a singular event marked by the end of the era of dragons in Westeros. But when you focus on that time period just after the Dance of the Dragons, the death of dragons is not just a singular event, but something that happens slowly over time. Yes, most of the adult dragons were killed over the course of the Dance of the Dragons, and several in the destruction of the Dragon Pit near the end of the war. But the reality is, it took several more years to possibly decades for the last dragons to fade into the pages of history. Plus, there are of course the weak and frail dragons that were hatched in the aftermath of the dance. In terms of the adult dragons, we know of the 2 wild dragons that were still active in the years after the dance, with Cannibal going missing after the war and Sheepstealer suspected to be hiding somewhere with her Dragonseed rider in the Mountain of the Vale. You also had the dragon of Rhaena Targaryen, Morning, whose current fate is as of yet unknown. So while the Dance of the Dragons marked the beginning of the end for dragons in Westeros, we don't really know for sure how long it took for the last dragon to die. The Reach during the Dance of the Dragons played a huge role in the conflict, owing to the fact that House Hightower made up with such a key part of the Greens, and thus they controlled Old Town, and while House Tyrell remained neutral, many of the Reach Lords did side with the Hightowers. While the Riverlands did become the site for many of the key bloody battles during the war, when you take a look back at history, the Reach was just as ravaged and bathed in blood as the Riverlands. Perhaps 2 of the bloodiest battles in the war happened at the town of Tumbleton in the Reach, with the Second Battle of Tumbleton being perhaps the single bloodiest battle involving dragons since the Doom of Valyria, with a total of 4 adult dragons being part of it, albeit 3 of those 4 ended up being riderless for most of the battle, which in turn added to the sheer chaos that makes the Second Battle of Tumbleton one of the most horrific battles of the Dance of the Dragons. Out of the 4 dragons to take part in the battle, Vermithor, Tessarion, Seasmoke and Silverwing, only Silverwing would survive the battle. Silverwing was the beloved dragon of good Queen Alysanne, with whom she had a very strong bond with. She was hatched in 36 AC when Alysanne's older sister, Rhaena, placed a dragon's egg in her cradle, with the egg soon hatching. Interestingly, it seems to be Rhaena who started the tradition of Targaryen babies having dragon eggs placed in their cradles soon after birth. She did this with both of her younger siblings, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, with these eggs hatching into Vermithor and Silverwing. Now, during the Dance of the Dragons, Silverwing was claimed by the Dragonseed, Ulf White, on behalf of Rhaenyra Targaryen and the Blacks, until Ulf swapped sides to the Greens just before Tumbleton. In the aftermath of the second battle, Silverwing was the only one of the 4 dragons to survive. It is impossible to know the mind of a dragon and how they perceive the world. Do they feel loss like a person would? Do they mourn the loss of their riders? Do they mourn the loss of their brothers and sisters? This question came to the forefront during the aftermath of the Second Tumbleton in the ravished fields of the Reach, as Silverwing began to display behaviour that had not been documented before in terms of dragon behaviour, with some maesters arguing Silverwing's actions were not only out of character for dragons, but also Silverwing herself. It is said that as the battle began to wind down, Silverwing avoided much of the conflict and instead circled the battlefield for hours aimlessly, roaring her sorrowful roar. She only stopped her circling and descended again the next day, after the sun had gone down and the crows had begun to gather, landing between the slain dragons of Vermithor, Seasmoke and Tessarion. The singers and some eyewitnesses' accounts claim that Silverwing had attempted to lift Vermithor's wing on 3 occasions, roaring with sorrow each time his wing fell back into the mud. While Archmaester Gildain considers this most likely to have been a fable to dramatise the aftermath of the battle, but some more marginalised maesters point towards Septon Barth's work on the biology of dragons, and suggest that Silverwing was mourning Vermithor. There is some evidence that support this possibility, namely that if Silverwing did possess the capacity to mourn, it would make sense for her to mourn Vermithor. The 2 dragons were that of King Jaehaerys and good Queen Alysanne. It is suggested the connection the king and queen shared could also have impacted and imprinted on their dragons. Needless to say, when the sun rose again the next morning, Silverwing began to fly listlessly across the fields, where she fed on the burned carcasses of men and animals for the next few days. As the Greens and the Hightower forces began to regroup in the smoking ruins of Tumbleton, Lord Unwin Peake, now in command of the army, offered 1,000 gold dragons to any knight of noble birth able to claim Silverwing. Out of the 3 men who came forth, the first had his arm torn off, the second burned to death, the third man then changed his mind as a result, and Silverwing remained unclaimed. Silverwing was only one of 4 dragons still alive at the end of the Dance of the Dragons. Although accustomed to men and civilization, Silverwing, after leaving the ruins of Tumbleton, went missing and could not be traced for several years. It is said that she became a wild dragon during the regency period of King Aegon III of Targaryen, on a small island with a cave in Red Lake in the northwest of the Reach. By 136 AC, we know that she was still living in the Reach, on her small island in Red Lake, when plans were being made for King Aegon III's royal progress across the whole of Westeros. Given the king's great dislike and fear of dragons, Red Lake would need be avoided, and given a wide berth. As of right now, we do not know the final fate of Silverwing, as she seems to fade into the pages of history after 136 AC. Some say she left Westeros and headed east across the narrow sea to Essos, perhaps returning to her ancestral home of Valyria, while others suggest she could have flown out west across the Sunset Sea, never to return. Just as likely is that Silverwing remained at Red Lake for the rest of her days before dying of old age sometime in the decades after the Dance of the Dragons. But all of these ideas are pure speculation, and unless further information is discovered, we may never know the true final fate of Silverwing, the dragon of Red Lake, who made her home in the Reach after the horrific bloodshed of both battles of Tumbleton.